She was the most feared pirate the world has ever known. Not a king, not a warlord, but a woman who ruled the South China Sea. From the shadows of a brothel, she rose to command 70,000 pirates and defy an empire. This is the untold story of Ching Shih, the pirate queen of the South China Sea. The South China Sea, early 19th century. The horizon burned with a crimson glow as the sun dipped beneath the waves. Fishing junks, battered by salt and storm, limped toward the safety of the harbors. But the waters were no longer ruled by emperors or merchants. They belonged to the pirates. And among them, none would become more feared, more cunning, or more ruthless than a woman history almost forgot Ching Shih. Before she commanded an empire of sails, cannons, and blood, she was known only as Shi Yang, a woman of striking intelligence and ambition. Born into poverty in the Guangdong province, she quickly learned the brutality of survival. The bustling ports of Canton were filled with gamblers, thieves, and traders from every corner of the world. And young Shi Yang grew up watching them bargain, cheat, and fight. She absorbed everything. The way men lied with a smile, the way silver could buy loyalty, and the way violence always spoke louder than words. Her fate turned when she became a courtesan in a floating brothel on the Pearl River. These establishments were not only places of pleasure, they were information hubs. Foreign captains, local warlords, and even imperial officers whispered secrets in the haze of wine and smoke. Shi Yang had the rare gift of listening, remembering, and calculating. She was beautiful, yes, but beauty fades. What set her apart was her mind. It was there, amidst velvet curtains and shadowed lanterns, that she encountered Zheng Yi, a notorious pirate commander whose fleet was terrorizing the South China Sea. Unlike most men, Zheng Yi did not underestimate her. He saw the sharpness in her gaze, the way she turned whispers into weapons. And so, in 1801, Shi Yang became Ching Shih wife to a pirate lord, yet destined to become far greater than her husband. But marriage to a pirate was no fairy tale. The Red Flag Fleet, commanded by Zheng Yi, was a brutal force. Hundreds of ships painted crimson, their sails blotting out the sun, raiding villages, seizing treasure, enslaving sailors. This was their way of life. Yet in this ruthless world, Ching Shih found her opportunity. She began advising Zheng Yi, helping him forge alliances with rival clans, expand their fleet, and strike against both merchants and the Qing dynasty itself. Her influence grew in whispers. Sailors spoke of the woman who could calm storms with a word, who could see opportunities in chaos. She learned the art of command, not through brute strength, but through strategy. While others saw plunder, she saw empire. By the year 1807, the Red Flag Fleet had swelled into a naval power unlike any seen before. More than 400 ships followed Zheng Yi, their black powder cannons thundering across the seas. European powers trembled, Qing officials were humiliated, and even the British East India Company kept its distance. But destiny would soon take a darker turn. One stormy night, Zheng Yi was swept overboard and lost to the waves. Some whispered it was fate, others claimed betrayal. But whatever the truth, the fleet was left without a leader. Rival captains sharpened their blades, ready to carve the empire apart. And then Ching Shih rose. A widow, yes, but far from powerless. In her eyes burned the fire fiercer than any storm. She would not surrender her husband's legacy. She would take it, forge it, and bend the South China Sea itself to her will. What began as whispers of influence would soon erupt into thunder, as Ching Shih transformed from pirate's wife to pirate queen, the most feared woman the oceans had ever known. The death of Zheng Yi should have shattered the Red Flag Fleet. For decades, pirate confederations had risen and fallen on the South China Sea, their power always tied to the charisma of a single male warlord. Without him, clans turned on each other, Allies became rivals, and blood often flowed faster than the tide. But this time, history took a different turn. Ching Shih, once dismissed as nothing more than the widow of a pirate, stepped into the void. She was not content to weep in silence, nor to fade into obscurity. Instead, she called together Xing Yi's lieutenants, the captains of hundreds of ships, men hardened by bloodshed, greed, and pride. In the smoky chambers of the flagship, under the flickering glow of lanterns, she spoke with the voice of steel. "You think the fleet will crumble because a man has drowned?" She challenged, her words cutting sharper than any blade. "No. Zheng Yi's spirit lives in the red flag fleet, and I will carry it forward." Some scoffed, others threatened. Yet when she revealed her alliances, her web of secrets, and the loyalty she had cultivated in silence, their defiance faltered. For years she had listened in the shadows, weaving influence like an unseen net. Now she tightened it. She bound the captains not through fear alone, but through contracts of power and profit to cement her authority. She took a bold step. She partnered with Zheng Yi's adopted son and right-hand lieutenant, Xiong Ho-Sai. Some whispered scandal, others spoke of strategy, but the truth was simple. Together, they were unstoppable. Xiong Ho-Sai brought loyalty of the core fleet, while Ching Shih brought cunning, diplomacy, and ruthless vision. Under her command, the red flag fleet grew not just in size, but in discipline. She imposed a code unlike any seen among pirates. Before, plunder was to be recorded, shared, and distributed fairly. Captured women were not to be abused, but either ransomed or integrated into the fleet. Any disobedience, any theft, any betrayal was punished by death. At first, the rules seemed harsh, even impossible. Yet they brought order to chaos. Pirates who once fought like rabid dogs began to march with precision. The red flag fleet became not a band of marauders, but a floating empire. Each ship knew its place, each captain his duty, and each raid its purpose. Soon, villages that once cursed the name of pirates bent their knees to her. Fishermen who feared slaughter instead found protection so long as they paid tribute. Merchants who resisted were crushed, their wealth seized. Those who submitted sailed under the shadow of crimson sails, part of a growing dominion that stretched from Guangdong to the Gulf of Tonkin. By 1808, Ching Shih commanded more than 70,000 men and over 800 ships. Her fleet dwarfed even the navies of major powers. The Qing dynasty, humiliated and desperate, launched campaign after campaign to crush her. Imperial junks, Portuguese frigates, even British ships, all were swept aside like driftwood. Belonged to her. Sailors whispered her name with awe and terror. To the common folk, she was a curse, a storm given flesh. To her followers, she was law, queen, and destiny. Never before had a woman ruled such a vast pirate empire, and never again. Would history see her equal? But power attracts enemies as surely as flame draws moths. The Qing court sharpened its knives. Foreign empires plotted revenge, and rival pirate clans bristled under her iron grip. Ching Shih had claimed her throne upon the waves, but to keep it, she would need to fight wars greater than any yet seen. On the South China Sea, the pirate queen had risen. Now the world would test her crown. The red flag fleet did not survive on terror alone. It endured because Ching Shih carved order out of chaos and set it in iron. She called it simply the code. At dawn, on the wide deck of the flagship, the captains assembled, sunlight glazing. The lacquered rails, salt wind tugging at crimson pennants. Ching Shih stood with Xiong Ho-Sai at her side, a scroll in her hands. This fleet, she declared, will not be a bonfire that burns bright and dies in ash. It will be a furnace that forges empire. The code was read aloud for all too. Here, Plunder is to be accounted for, logged by the quartermaster, and divided according to rank. No captain may conceal spoils. No sailor may pocket silver unrecorded. Harm to surrendered villagers is punishable by death. Assault of any woman, whether captive or free, means death. Orders at sea are not suggestions. They are law. Disobey, and the sea will claim you by my hand, if not by the waves. Some captains shifted, cheeks tight with resentment. Pirates were used to taking what they could and sharing what they must. But Ching Shih gave them something greater than greed. She gave them certainty. Raids would now be precise, distribution predictable, survival likelier. The first test came sooner than expected. Captain Hu, a hawk-faced raider with a reputation for vanishing chests, tried to play the old game. After a lucrative strike against a coastal warehouse, his crew returned light by 3 ingots of silver. The quartermaster said nothing. Ching Shih did not raise her voice. She simply ordered a second tally, then a third. 3 ingots remained. Missing. They brought Hu to the deck. The crew held its breath. To spare him would be weakness. To kill him might fracture the fleet. Ching Shih's gaze weighed the cost. Captain Hu, she said, you are not on trial for theft alone. You are on trial for endangering every soul under the red flag. She did not scream. She did not gloat. She spoke as if announcing the weather. Death. The execution was swift, the sea red for a heartbeat, then calm as glass. A shudder ran. Through the fleet, resentment transmuted into respect. The code was no longer ink on silk. It was the air they breathed. From that day, the red-flagged fleet moved like a single organism. Sails unfurled in unison. Drums beat orders across the water. Raids began before lookouts finished blinking, ended before garrisons knew whom to blame. Tribute flowed: rice, silk, salt, tea, and most importantly, information. Ching Shih's spy network grew like coral, quiet, patient, and unbreakable. Fisherwomen along the estuaries tapped oars 3 times on their gunwales when imperial patrols passed. Tavern peepers scratched coded marks beneath stools. A boy with a kite on the city wall pulled 1 string for 2 ships, 2 strings for 6. Even a minor official with debts to the wrong men found it wise to slip a note into a wine jar and let the tide deliver it. Chiang Po Sai drilled the crews relentlessly. Grappling lines were thrown until hands blistered and healed into callus. Cannon crews raced the sand in hourglasses, shaving seconds until the reloads felt like a sleight of hand. Boarding parties learned to move as dancers. Hook, pull, surge, strike 4 motions. 1 breath. When the Portuguese sent a swift brigantine to test the pirate queen, Ching Shih did not meet them with raw bravado. She sent out 2 decoy junks in close formation to mimic an overloaded merchant convoy. The brigantine lunged, eager and arrogant, only to find itself threaded between the decoys. From both flanks, hidden swivel guns chattered. Grapnels curled like iron fingers. The brigantines. Sailors fought with European discipline. The pirates answered with the cool mathematics of the code. In minutes, a foreign flag fluttered upside down, and the red flag flew where it had not before. Word spread that the pirate queen took foreign sails as trophies and imperial seals as pocket charms. The Qing court blanched. Orders went out, stamped with dragons and fear. A blockade would form at the mouth of the Pearl River Boca Tigris, the tiger's mouth. Junks reinforced with iron plates, hired expertise from far shores, cannon placed to sweep the channels. If the red flag fleet wanted the inland trade routes, it would have to punch through the tiger's teeth. On the eve of the challenge, a flagship anchored in a hush of dusk. Lanterns bobbed like fallen stars across the harbor. Ching Shih stood at the prow, watching the dark line of the river mouth, where the night seemed thicker, as if it were hiding guns and men and schemes. "Tomorrow," Chiang Hosai said quietly, "they'll be waiting with everything they have." "Good," she answered. "Let them spend it." He glanced at her, searching her face for doubt and finding none. "If the code breaks, the code doesn't break," she said. "Men do, the ones who do not belong to us." She lifted her hand. Behind them, 100 lanterns were snuffed at once. The fleet dissolved into shadow discipline made invisible. Drums would not sound tonight. Orders would travel by rope and breath and the tremor of wood. The pirate queen had sculpted an army of water and wind. Now she would teach the tiger's mouth to choke not far upriver. A magistrate wrote 2 characters. In a trembling hand, dash calamity. The tide turned. The fleet waited. And the sea, sensing a story, held its breath. The Pearl River narrowed as it met the sea, a place of cliffs and shallows, channels and shifting sandbars. For centuries, locals had called it the tiger's mouth. Sail too close to its teeth, and the current would grind your keel into splinters. For the Qing Empire, it was the perfect place to trap the red flag fleet. On that fateful morning, smoke coiled from the shore batteries, where imperial cannons bristled. Reinforced war junks, their sides clad in iron plates, waited and staggered. Lines. Behind them, Portuguese mercenary frigates lent European firepower, their sails taut with foreign ambition. The plan was simple: lure Ching Shih into the river, close the jaws, and crush her against stone and gunpowder. But the Empire had forgotten who they were hunting out at dawn. The horizon blushed with crimson as hundreds of red flag sails appeared, unfurling like a rising storm. The pirates rowed in silence, no drums, no cries, only the steady churn of oars. Each ship glided as if pulled by the same invisible thread. From the shore, the commanders laughed. "They march into their coffin," one boasted, raising a cup of wine. But Ching Shih had no intention of being buried. Her flagship moved at the center of the formation, its deck alive with precision. She raised her hand, and a series of flags snapped into the wind. To the untrained eye, it was chaos. To the fleet, it was scripture. The vanguard did not rush forward. They feigned retreat, drifting toward the sandbars as though cowed. The Qing junks advanced eagerly, pounding their drums. And then, at the crucial moment, the tide turned. Literally. Ching Shih had timed her maneuver to the shifting waters. As the imperial junks pressed forward, their heavy hulls found themselves grinding into the shoals. Masts tilted, cannons misfired, crews cursed as their anchors bit mud instead of sea. That was when the pirates struck. From the flanks, concealed squadrons of light junks darted out, sails snapping like whips. Grappling hooks arced through the air, biting into imperial decks. Pirates swarmed like ants, blades flashing in the morning sun. The Empire's disciplined formations dissolved into chaos. The Portuguese frigates loosed broadsides, thunder cracking across the strait. Cannonballs shredded sails, shattered masts, and tore through planks. But Ching Shih had anticipated even this. She had equipped her fleet with fire rafts junk hulls, stuffed with pitch, oil, and gunpowder. At her signal, they drifted downriver, carried by tide and wind. The first fire raft smashed against a Portuguese hull, exploding into a blossom of flame. Smoke cloaked the battlefield, turning day into dusk. Flames licked at the sky as men screamed and leapt into the churning water. By midday, the tiger's mouth had become a slaughterhouse. Dozens of imperial junks burned, their banners sinking. Beneath the tide, the Portuguese frigates, mauled and half afire, limped for open water. On the cliffs, the cannon crews abandoned their posts, unwilling to waste powder on ships that seemed to multiply with every wave. When the smoke cleared, crimson sails still flew, unbroken, across the river mouth. The red-flagged fleet had not only survived the jaws of the tiger, it had shattered its teeth. The victory was more than military. It was symbolic. The empire had thrown its full weight against a woman, and she had not merely endured, she had triumphed. From that day, Ching Shih was no longer just a pirate queen. She was a phantom of the sea, a storm the emperors themselves could not cage. Back on the flagship, Chiang Po-sai knelt before her. "You've done what no warlord, no admiral, no emperor has achieved. The sea belongs to you." Ching Shih looked out across the smoke-stained horizon, her eyes hard as tempered steel. "No," she said. "A sea belongs to those who have the courage to take it, and I will never let it go." From Boca Tigris, her legend spread like wildfire. Merchants prayed before sailing, foreign captains cursed her name, and the Qing court sat in silence, fearing to utter the truth. A woman now ruled the South China Sea. After the tiger's mouth, the South China Sea bent to Ching Shih's will. The once fragmented pirate clans now rallied beneath her crimson banners, not from love, but from fear and respect. She was no longer the widow of Zheng Yi, nor the partner of Chiang Po-sai. She was the supreme commander of an empire afloat. By 1809, the red flag fleet had grown to staggering proportions. Over 800 ships, from sleek raiding junks to towering war vessels, answered her call. Her forces numbered more than 70,000 men and women, a population larger than many cities of the Qing dynasty. To common folk, it seemed as though the sea itself had become a nation, ruled not by emperor or general, but by a woman with iron eyes and a steady hand. Life under the pirate queen was unlike any other. Her code, strict and merciless, shaped a society bound by law instead of chaos. Captains kept careful records of loot. Quartermasters distributed shares with mathematical precision. Villagers under her protection delivered rice, salt, and silk as tribute, knowing they would not be slaughtered if they obeyed. Even surrendered soldiers sometimes found a place in her ranks, provided they swore loyalty and abided by her. Rules. Foreign observers could scarcely believe it. Reports filtered back to Europe that described her fleet as a floating metropolis, its decks bustling with cooks, smiths, carpenters, healers, and spies. Sails stretched across the horizon, like crimson clouds, moving with uncanny unity. "It is not a band of pirates," one Portuguese officer admitted bitterly, "but a kingdom that sails." Ching Shih herself ruled with a mixture of ruthlessness and cold pragmatism. She punished betrayal with execution, but rewarded competence with wealth and influence. Unlike many warlords, she listened. Sailors could bring grievances before her, and if their claims were just, she enforced fairness even against captains. This balance of terror and justice bound her fleet tighter than chains. Her enemies, however, multiplied. The Qing court seethed with humiliation, dispatching fleet after fleet to crush her. Each time, their junks came back burning, their crews scattered. The Portuguese, licking their wounds from Boca Tigris, launched joint expeditions with the Qing. Even the British and Dutch weighed in, hoping to pry open trade routes choked by the red flag blockade. Yet time and again, Ching Shih prevailed. Part of her genius lay in information. She did not strike blindly. Her spies reported cargo manifests before ships even left port. Governors found their sealed letters already opened. Qing officers discovered that their trusted messengers whispered to the pirate queen by night. To fight her was to fight an enemy who always knew your next move. But perhaps her greatest weapon was not her fleet, nor her spies, nor her cannons. It was fear. Merchants told tales of the red flag sails appearing at dawn, blotting out the sun. Fishermen whispered of fire rafts drifting silently toward anchored ships. Captains prayed to every god they knew, begging not to see the crimson banners rise from the horizon. Mothers hushed their children with warnings. Be good, or the pirate queen will take you. For the Qing dynasty, it was humiliation on a scale they could scarcely endure. Here was a woman, once a courtesan, now commanding more ships than the Hun. Empire's navy. She levied taxes, enforced laws, and struck peace deals. She was not a pirate in their eyes anymore. She was a rival state dot, and Ching Shih knew it. Standing on the prow of her flagship, she looked upon her endless fleet lanterns. Glowing, sails swelling, decks alive with disciplined chaos. This, she told Chiang Po-sai, is no longer just a fleet. This is an empire, and empires do not kneel. But empires attract storms. Even as she savored her triumph, alliances against her thickened. Qing admirals sharpened their plans. Portuguese captains swore revenge. And in the shadows, whispers spread of new weapons and foreign strategies that might finally pierce her invincible armada. The pirate queen had built a nation on water. Now she would be tested by fire. For years, the Qing court had endured humiliation. Reports of burned junks, ransomed villages, and vanished silver bled into the forbidden city like a constant wound. Ministers bowed low, trembling as they spoke of the pirate queen. Some whispered that her fleet was blessed by sea gods. Others feared that the empire itself was cursed for allowing a woman to eclipse the son of heaven's navy dot by 1810. The court could tolerate no more. Edicts thundered across the provinces. A grand coalition would be forged imperial junks, Portuguese frigates, and even foreign gunners from Macau. A bounty glittered on Ching Shih's head, promising wealth and honor to any man who could deliver. Her bound in chains dot the campaign began with thunder. Massive war junks, their hulls reinforced with iron, sailed from Canton. Portuguese frigates, sleek and deadly, joined them in formation. European cannons bristled, promising to tear apart. Pirate hulls with disciplined broadsides. The empire no longer underestimated her. They would crush her with numbers, firepower, and coordination dot, but Ching Shih was ready. From the deck of her flagship, she surveyed the horizon. Her fleet stretched like a scarlet tide, hundreds of sails, blotting out the sky. She knew brute force would not win. She relied on what had always set her apart: strategy, patience, and the iron discipline of her code dot. As the coalition advanced, she ordered her fleet to scatter, then vanish. Villages whispered of ghost ships slipping into hidden bays, pirate sails dissolving into mist. The Qing commanders grew frustrated, their massive fleet lumbering through empty waters. Supplies dwindled, morale sagged. When the imperial drums faltered, Ching Shih struck. The first ambush came at dusk. Coalition ships anchored in a narrow strait, believing themselves safe. Then the tide shifted, and with it came fire. Junk after junk appeared from the shadows, their decks bristling with flaming arrows and firepots. Grappling hooks clattered. Against Portuguese hulls, pirates swarming like locusts. Cannons roared until the cliffs themselves trembled. By dawn, the strait was a graveyard of shattered masts and drifting corpses. News of the slaughter spread like plague. In Canton, panic took root. Merchants refused to sail, trade ground to a halt, and even soldiers muttered that the empire fought a losing war. She is everywhere, they whispered. She knows our plans before we make them. They were not wrong. Ching Shih's spy network thrived. Tavern keepers, fisherfolk, even minor officials funneled her secrets in exchange for coin or protection. She struck supply lines, raided outposts, and captured officers whose confessions exposed entire fleets. The coalition, built on shaky alliances, began to fracture. The Portuguese resented Qing commanders. Imperial officers distrusted foreign mercenaries. Rivalries festered while the pirate queen tightened her grip. Yet victory did not come without cost. The empire's cannons grew deadlier, its strategies sharper. In one brutal clash, dozens of pirate junks were reduced to splinters, their crews swallowed by the sea. Smoke and fire scarred the horizon, and for the first time in years, whispers of doubt crept through the fleet. Could even Ching Shih withstand the endless weight of an empire? On the flagship, Chiang Po-sai voiced the question. They will. Not stop. Every time we cut them down, more rise in their place. Even the sea cannot swallow an empire forever. Ching Shih's gaze did not waver. She touched the railing, fingers stained with salt and ash. Empires, she said coldly, rot from within. We need only hasten the decay. Her words spread like fire through the fleet, rekindling resolve. To her men, she was not just a commander. She was inevitability. The coalition's campaign dragged on, draining coffers, bleeding soldiers, and eroding alliances. Ching Shih's fleet, battered yet unbroken, remained a phantom on the water. No matter how many ships the Empire launched, crimson sails still rose at dawn dot, and so, faced with mounting failures and spiraling costs, the Qing court considered the unthinkable: negotiation. The war had dragged on for years. The Qing treasury bled silver into the sea, soldiers deserted, and merchants cursed the heavens. The pirate queen had not been defeated, yet even her fleet bore scar ships lost, men slain, supplies harder. Together, both sides knew the truth. Endless war could only end in ruin, and so the unthinkable happened. The Qing dynasty empire of dragons, heirs to centuries of rule extended, an olive branch to a pirate. When word reached Ching Shih, her lieutenants bristled. Some urged her to accept immediately, fearing the empire's growing resolve. Others demanded rejection, eager to bleed the Qing further. But the pirate queen silenced them with a glance. We will not crawl to their table, she declared. They will crawl to ours. In 1810, emissaries from the imperial court arrived at Canton. Cloaked in silk, heavy with jewels, they expected to find a desperate woman clinging to fading power. Instead, they found a queen. Ching Shih entered the chamber dressed in crimson silk trimmed with gold, her presence as commanding as any emperor's. At her side stood Chiang Po-sai, loyal as ever, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Behind her, guards in pirate colors stood as disciplined as imperial soldiers, their silence unnerving. The negotiators spoke first, voices smooth with arrogance. The Son of Heaven offers you mercy, they intoned. Surrender your fleet. Bow before the empire, and you may live. Ching Shih laughed, a sharp, cutting sound that froze the room. Mercy? You could not buy my surrender with all the silver in your vaults. You have chased me for years, spent fortunes, spilled blood. And yet here I stand, unbroken. You do not summon me. I summon you. Her terms were laid with the precision of a blade. Amnesty for herself, her captains, and every member of her fleet, the right to keep her wealth, ships, and freedom from punishment. Integration of her men into the Imperial Navy if they wished, with full pay and recognition. And above all, her marriage to Chiang Po-sai, legitimized and sanctioned by the Empire. The emissaries balked. Impossible. You are criminals. Her eyes narrowed. No, we are power. Power you cannot destroy. Accept my terms, or continue bleeding your empire dry. Silence hung in the chamber. Outside, merchants starved, soldiers deserted, and ministers whispered of rebellion. The empire could not afford endless war. Slowly, reluctantly, the emissaries bowed their heads. A Son of Heaven will consider your demands. Weeks later, the impossible was made real. A royal edict was issued. Full pardon for Ching Shih and her fleet. Thousands of pirates laid down arms, not in defeat, but in triumph, receiving imperial amnesty. Many joined the navy, swelling the emperor's forces. Others returned to villages, pockets heavy with plunder, their names washed clean. And Ching Shih herself? She retired, not in disgrace, but in luxury. Her marriage to Chiang Po Sai was formally recognized. She became a wealthy widow once more, running a prosperous gambling house in Canton. No gallows awaited her, no exile, no chains. She had bent an empire to her will and walked away free in the annals of history. Few figures could boast such. An ending. Kings were executed, generals betrayed, emperors dethroned. But Ching Shih, a woman who rose from poverty to piracy, from courtesan to commander, from outlaw to negotiator, ended her days in comfort and power. The pirate queen had written her own ending. The seas quieted. The thunder of cannons, the clash of steel, the terror of crimson sails, these became memories, fading like storm clouds on the horizon. For the first time in decades, the South China Sea was calm. And in Canton, behind silk, curtains and incense smoke, lived the woman who had tamed it all. Ching Shih had retired from piracy. Yet she had not retreated from power. With the imperial amnesty sealed in gold, she transformed her wealth into influence on land. In Canton, she opened a prosperous gambling house. Its lanterns glowed bright each night, drawing merchants, scholars, and even imperial officials. Silver flowed across her tables as easily as it once flowed across the decks of her ships. To outsiders, she seemed almost ordinary, now a widow in fine silk, managing her business with calm efficiency. But those who looked closer saw the steel that had never left her eyes. Patrons who cheated her tables found themselves ruined. Officials who thought to exploit her influence discovered their secrets laid bare. She played the same game she had. At sea, only now with dice, ledgers, and whispers. Her marriage to Chiang Po Sai flourished, though in quieter ways. He, too, had accepted imperial service for a time, commanding men once called pirates under the emperor's banner. Later, he joined her in their new life ashore. Together, they raised children in a world far removed from the cannon smoke of their youth. Yet even in peace, they remained legends. Among the common folk, stories spread like wildfire. Some claimed that Ching Shih could still command the waves with a glance. Others swore her gambling house was a front for a secret fleet, waiting to rise again if the empire dared betray her. Sailors toasted her name in taverns from Macau to Malacca, half in awe, half in fear. Foreigners, too, carried her legend across oceans. Portuguese merchants muttered of the woman who had burned their frigates. British officers studied her tactics, marveling that a fleet of outlaws had humbled empires. In whispers and in print, she became both myth and warning, a reminder that discipline and cunning could turn even the lowest born into a ruler of seas. As the years passed, her empire of sails dissolved into history. Yet she remained, aging gracefully, her silks as fine as any empress's, her fortune secure. Unlike so many of her peers, she did not die in chains, in battle, or in exile. She lived long enough to see grandchildren, to watch the world change, to smile knowingly when men spoke of pirates as though they had vanished. But in quiet moments, as she gazed at the Pearl River shimmering in moonlight, perhaps she remembered the snap of sails in the wind, the pounding of drums across the water, the roar of cannon fire at the tiger's mouth, the way thousands of men once bent the knee to her word. And perhaps she smiled, not with regret, but with satisfaction. For Ching Shih had done what no emperor, no general, no warlord ever could. She had ruled an empire of waves and vanished not in defeat, but in triumph. In 1844, at the age of 69, she died peacefully in her bed. No blade struck her, no rope bound her, no sea swallowed her. For a pirate, it was an ending as rare as treasure. When the news spread, sailors across the South China Sea raised cups of rice wine in her honor. The sea has lost its queen, they said, but her spirit still sails. Her name lived on, carved not in marble or jade, but in legend. Centuries have passed since crimson sails darkened the South China Sea, yet the shadow of Ching Shih still lingers. Her story did not sink with her death in 1844. Instead, it spread, carried by sailors' songs, foreign reports, and whispered tales in ports from Asia to Europe. Most pirates vanish into obscurity, killed in battle, hanged by kings, or swallowed by the ocean's indifference. But Ching Shih was different. She retired rich, respected, and untouchable. Historians still struggle to explain how a woman, born in poverty, once a courtesan, rose to command the largest pirate fleet the world has ever known. Her achievements remain unmatched. At her height, she commanded over 70,000 men and 800 ships. She defeated imperial navies, Portuguese frigates, and European traders alike. She enforced a code of law so strict that her pirate fleet functioned with more discipline than many national armies. She negotiated with an empire and won, securing amnesty for her men and wealth for herself. These facts alone would make her legendary. But her true legacy lies deeper in the way she shattered expectations. In a world dominated by men, she carved her name not by accident, but by will. She proved that power bowed not to gender nor birth, but to cunning, vision, and ruthless resolve. Today, scholars write of her as one of the greatest naval strategists of the 19th century. Feminist historians call her a trailblazer, a woman who turned the rules of a patriarchal world against itself. Military academies study her tactics at Boca Tigris, marveling at her use of deception, discipline, and timing. Yet, among the common people, her legend takes a different shape. In fishing villages, old grandmothers still tell children of the pirate queen who ruled the waves. Some speak of her as a ghost, still sailing under the full moon, her crimson sails glowing like fire. Others imagine her watching from the afterlife, smiling at every storm, reminding mortals that the sea belongs to no emperor. Her story has even leapt into modern culture books, plays, films, and ballads. She is remembered not only as a pirate, but as a queen, a strategist, and a survivor. Unlike Blackbeard or Bartholomew Roberts, who met bloody ends, Ching Shih proved that even in the ruthless world of piracy, intellect could triumph over brute force. Perhaps that is why her legend endures. She was not invincible, not immortal, but unyielding. She bent chaos into order, turned fear into obedience, and forced one of the greatest empires on earth to kneel. Standing at the edge of history, she is less a figure of the past and more a symbol of possibility. The courtesan who became a queen, the outlaw who outwitted emperors, the woman who commanded an empire of waves. And so the tale of Ching Shih does not end with her death, nor with the quiet gambling house in Canton where she spent her final years. It lives on every time a sail catches the wind, every time the sea reminds mankind of its power. For as long as the oceans endure, sailors will whisper her name, Ching Shih, the pirate queen of the South China Sea.